Disney CEO Bob Iger, the many executives over there, the board of directors, they are all in panic mode over this movie.
Yeah, we're sick of it. So the more you do this, Disney, Iger, Rachel Zegler, whatever her name is, yes, this is exactly the backlash you're going to get from parents who have kids who are your customers.
A few lessons for Disney. Number one, stop cannibalizing all your old IP. Like, it's really bad. It's really bad.
Pay her a couple $1,000,000, go away. We're going to bring another person to play this role because you just screwed this thing up.
Rachel Zegler, once the seemingly unstoppable rising star of Hollywood, is now in the middle of a new meltdown that nobody saw coming.
But it's hard. And it's lonely. It's very lonely. I just know that if that loneliness can exist, so can other things, and I will be okay.
Whispers inside Disney claim she's hit a breaking point over an alleged mysterious Snow White remake plan that the studio is quietly kicking into gear. Yes, you read that right. Just as the dust is settling from the catastrophic box office flop that Zegler headlined, Disney has apparently greenlit another take on the same classic story.
We already know that there's a lot of other issues associated with Snow White 2025.
But instead of relief, insiders say Zegler is furious and feeling blindsided. She's melting down behind closed doors, convinced that the studio's pivot will bury her version and shift any chance she has at redeeming her battered reputation.
Idiot I've been as a young person in this industry who has no filter and no idea.
Word around Tinseltown is that she's lashing out, calling the new plan an outright betrayal and accusing Disney of discarding her entire adaptation as though it were just an expensive prototype nobody wants to remember. The meltdown is only growing more public by the day.
I never want it to come off as me being ungrateful for the opportunities I have. I can also be having the greatest time and simultaneously wishing people would stop sending me death threats.
After weeks of negative coverage and humiliating images of empty theaters, the possibility that Disney will fast-track a new Snow White to undo the fiasco has apparently sent Zegler into a tailspin. Some sources claim she's telling close friends that a second, more faithful remake will be the final nail in her career coffin. If the new project ends up capturing hearts the way her version couldn't, she's convinced the world will look back on her stint as the misguided experiment, forever labeled as the actress who tried to modernize a beloved classic and stumbled spectacularly.
It's just a really incredible story for, I think, young people everywhere to see themselves in.
Snow White is running for president.
I'm launching my campaign.
Meanwhile, fans are left gawking at the magnitude of the drama, wondering if Disney can possibly salvage Snow White's legacy after it took such a brutal pummeling, or if Zegler's meltdown will overshadow any second attempt. In short, the meltdown has escalated from a quiet simmer to a full-blown Hollywood firestorm. Rachel Zegler versus Disney Round 2.
Acting, the producing, the writing, the directing, the cinematography, everything to do with the line delivery, just everything about the film is just abysmal. And
so how did we get here? From the hopeful casting of a young star in a big-budget reimagining to a meltdown so fierce that it's overshadowing every other conversation about the film? Let's backtrack. Snow White 2025 was a project riddled with missteps from day one. Among them, baffling creative changes that alienated fans, marketing misalignment, and a star, Rachel Zegler, who repeatedly made controversial statements about the original story and various political issues.
No, Prince or a different kind of Prince?
I'm sure a lot of people will assume it's a love story just because, like, we cast a guy in the movie. Right. Andrew Burnap, great dude. Yeah. All of Andrew's scenes could get cut. Who knows? It's Hollywood, baby.
Who the hell are you to say all of Andrew's scenes could get cut? Like, who are you? Oh my God. Are you Disney?
Critics say she disrespected the 1937 classic, hammered the so-called stalker prince, replaced dwarfs with lackluster CGI creatures, and basically told half the electorate to never know peace. None of this sat well with the broader fan base. By the time the film limped into theaters, seats were embarrassingly empty, and the meltdown looked unstoppable. Now the meltdown enters a second phase with the rumored course correction project. The official line from Disney is that they want to reaffirm their commitment to classic storytelling and reconnect with nostalgic audiences. For them, resurrecting Snow White a mere year or two after it flopped might look like a desperate move, but from a corporate standpoint, the brand damage was so severe that the studio sees no other choice.
If I'm Bob Iger, you know what we're doing? Emergency meeting. We're putting Snow White on hold for 2 years, and guess what? Pay her a couple $1,000,000, go away. We're going to bring another person to play this role because you just screwed this thing up.
A new Snow White is, in essence, a do-over, rebooting a fiasco that cost hundreds of millions of dollars and likely cut into the trust that families typically place in Disney's fairy tale remakes. It's a high-stakes gamble. Double down on the same IP that just failed, hoping to cleanse the fiasco from memory with a version that's presumably more faithful, more magical, and, crucially, less divisive. Meanwhile, how's Rachel Zegler reacting to all this?
That's one interview clip that you read the quote from, but she's gone on to talk about this film numerous times, how she once thought Snow White was creepy, she doesn't like the prince, she thinks she should get paid more because she has to wear that dress, she should get paid for streaming, for every hour she has to wear the dress. I mean, talk about biting the hand that feeds you.
According to the Meltdown watchers, not well at all. She may have once dismissed older fans as overly protective of a weird, outdated story, but those older fans now feel vindicated, pointing to empty auditoriums as proof that Zegler's progressive path was a grave miscalculation. People who championed her modernization are quiet, overshadowed by the meltdown that has overshadowed the film from all angles. Zegler's meltdown soared with each new wave of controversies. From remarks that the original love story was weird, to unveiling woke dwarfs, and culminating in a fiasco so total that even discount movie nights couldn't salvage the box office. But now, this rumored new plan for a fresh Snow White has escalated the meltdown into an entirely new dimension. Disney apparently doesn't want to wait 5 or 10 years to let the memory of this fiasco fade. They want to get in front of the brand damage as quickly as possible. They aim for a more traditional narrative, singing forest animals, a faithful storyline, the dwarfs portrayed in a less offensive manner, and far less star-driven controversy.
Did the dwarfs make it or no?
Well, the CGI dwarfs did. Of course, that goes back to the original controversy where Peter Dinklage, a very talented little person actor, said, "Why are we doing that? We've hired a Latina actress to be Snow White. That's progressive. But you're going to hire little people to play the dwarfs? That just seems like a step backwards." And then, of course, Disney instantly buckled and said, "Okay, we're going to add magical creatures."
That means Zegler's iteration becomes the odd project out, locked away in the vault of flops and overshadowed by a new official readaptation. For Zegler, who presumably poured months of her life into the role, it's a personal meltdown, a feeling that Disney is essentially erasing her biggest break to pretend it never existed. Insiders say she's meltdown-level angry that the studio didn't at least stand behind her creative approach with real conviction. Instead, they're hitting the reset button swiftly, while the fiasco is still fresh in the public's mind.
For Snow White, it's coming to terms with finding herself and finding her inner voice and finding a sense of agency so that she can be a just ruler and a wonderful queen, because there's another one in town.
But what about the fiasco itself? Early on, fans heard about reshoot mania, plus a budget that soared far beyond $250 million. Then came the dwarfs fiasco, ironically triggered by Peter Dinklage's remarks that Disney was blindly updating one aspect of the story, like casting a Latina as Snow White, while ignoring caveman-like dwarfs. Disney scrambled, eventually opting for CG placeholders that fans widely mocked.
These are roles made for actors of my stature. I can't go out for the Harrison Ford or the George Clooney roles because that's not for me.
Right.
And now it's taken away. I don't feel that's right.
Meanwhile, Rachel Zegler's own statements calling the original romance awkward or stalkerish fanned the meltdown. A chunk of fans wondered if Zegler even liked Snow White at all, or if she was just there to blow up the narrative. The meltdown watchers say that negativity overshadowed every marketing push, overshadowed the usual Disney charm, overshadowed co-star interactions, everything. The result was a meltdown so thorough that even the studio's top PR people didn't know how to spin it. The box office gave the final verdict. A dismal opening weekend and tepid overall performance that left no illusions about a potential slow burn success.
And I guess people followed suit. There are empty theaters all around the country. We are now at a 1 out of 10 on IMDb for the new Snow White, and it couldn't happen to a better person. What is the lesson to be learned here?
Even the real-life dwarfs fiasco flared the meltdown. Some argued it stripped roles from actors with dwarfism, while Disney tried to be sensitive and ended up with CG creations that no one wanted. Rumors swirl that internal studio emails laid bare the confusion behind these changes, with marketing, creative, and PR departments all pulling in different directions. The meltdown watchers say if Disney had stuck to the original formula, they might have avoided a meltdown of this scale.
Then they got even crazier and they decided that the dwarves in Snow White weren't woke enough, okay?
But everything snowballed, culminating in top brass deciding to cut their losses and plan a new Snow White. Given the meltdown's severity, the new plan reportedly aims for a starkly different approach. No more overtly woke revisions. No overshadowing star controversies. No questionable dwarfs replacements. Instead, they'll likely revert to the 1937 blueprint, adjusting only minor details for modern audiences. The Meltdown watchers interpret this as Disney admitting that the grand experiment in modernization failed so severely it harmed the brand's core. Rachel Zegler finds herself not just overshadowed, but overshadowed by the meltdown to the point that the entire film might go down in the studio's lore as a fiasco on the level of John Carter or the Lone Ranger.
There's something wrong with her. She's disturbed, she's unhappy, and she thinks it's about feminism and the patriarchy and about abortion. But the reality is she's just not stable, like the majority of people in Hollywood. They're just not stable human beings.
That's presumably a bitter pill for someone who started out with West Side Story praise and was touted as a generational talent. Of course, one might wonder if the meltdown could have been avoided had Disney reined in Ziegler's more polarizing rhetoric. Could a don't offend half the country approach have lessened the meltdown? Possibly. Disney's CEO is in panic mode, grappling with backlash not just from fans, but from within the industry, where far left-wing activists are also turning on Zegler. The Meltdown watchers say it's a sign that no one in Hollywood is safe once a fiasco crosses a certain threshold. The Meltdown overshadowed any initial goodwill Zegler enjoyed, fueling calls for a brand new star to anchor any future Snow White project. And so the Meltdown barrels forward with speculation about who might star in the newly announced version. Word is Disney wants a classic Hollywood elegance, a safe choice who won't provoke social media storms. They also want directors and scriptwriters who appreciate the original rather than reinventing the wheel. The Meltdown watchers read that as a direct reversal from the Zegler approach. Their stance: we tried modernization, we got hammered, let's revert to core Disney values.
They have been making this film for a very long time because it's just been so scandalized. And so they had to basically put it on ice after people were firstly outraged by Rachel Zegler speaking ill about the prior film, the film that she was remaking. And it's such a weird thing for their whole pitch as feminists to be is like the best thing you can strive to be as a man. Everything will be great once we just act exactly like men. There's nothing special about being a woman. Let's just be men. It just doesn't feel like we're winning.
For many fans, that's a welcome approach. For others, it might feel like the meltdown forced the studio to cling to tradition at the expense of diversity or progressive messages. That debate rages on. Simultaneously, watchers wonder if Zegler's meltdown might escalate further if she attempts to lash out at Disney for betraying her version. Some rumor that an NDA or contractual obligation might silence her. Others predict she'll pivot to smaller projects or possibly activism. The Meltdown watchers note that her star power might be tarnished for mainstream blockbusters, but she could find roles in more niche corners of the industry. Assuming the Meltdown hasn't made studios universally wary, whether she recovers or the Meltdown engulfs her entire career is anyone's guess.
Let's say that you were in a Hollywood movie, and the trailer for that movie dropped on YouTube, and it instantly became the #1 most downvoted trailer in the history of the platform. That might be a humbling experience.
Meanwhile, the Meltdown stands as a cautionary tale for future Disney live-action ventures. The House of Mouse can no longer bank on brand recognition alone, particularly if the star at the center stokes controversies that overshadow the promotional narrative. The Meltdown watchers see it as a sign of shifting times. Fans, especially nostalgic older fans, aren't tolerant of radical changes to beloved classics. Yet younger audiences are bored by carbon copies. There's a tension between preserving the source's charm and evolving it for new sensibilities. This Meltdown reveals that tipping too far in one direction can, ironically, alienate everybody. Another dimension, the Meltdown's financial toll. Disney can't risk another $250 million fiasco that yields empty seats. That might mean fewer lavish reshoots or less CG tinkering, ironically reverting to simpler storytelling that presumably resonates more authentically. The Meltdown watchers find it ironic that the biggest lesson from a meltdown about modern feminism might be a classic, heartfelt approach that just gave them massive successes in decades past. But will audiences trust another Disney do-over so soon? The brand took a serious credibility hit, and fans might see the second adaptation as a crass attempt to bury the first fiasco. On the other hand, a portion of the public might happily embrace a more faithful version, ignoring or forgetting the meltdown-laden adaptation from 2025. That's exactly what Disney hopes. That time or a shiny new star can overshadow the meltdown, effectively hitting reset.
This is really a bad movie, and I apologize to Walt Disney himself. I'm sorry.
Meanwhile, For Rachel Zegler, caught in meltdown crosshairs, such a success story might be the final blow, overshadowing her version so thoroughly that it becomes a cautionary footnote. If that's fueling her meltdown now, it might only intensify as the new project picks up steam. We'd be remiss not to mention how the meltdown also hammered merchandising. Disney's consumer product division apparently lost millions in unsold stock. That meltdown extends to synergy with theme parks, where we see fewer cross-promotions or Snow White parades. If the new adaptation is greenlit, that synergy might be revived, overshadowing any trace of Zegler's iteration. A meltdown of this scale often sees the studio sever all references to a fiasco. We might see the 2025 Snow White vanish from official canon, overshadowed by the new version's marketing push. Ultimately, as meltdown watchers keep tabs on each new rumor, it's clear that Rachel Zegler stands at a crossroads. She can accept the meltdown, acknowledging her adaptation flopped, or she can wage a bigger public war, claiming Disney set her up or bungled the film from within. She might also remain silent, focusing on smaller roles or musicals, waiting for the meltdown to blow over. For audiences, this meltdown is oddly mesmerizing. The film that started with such promise has become a lesson in how quickly a project can unravel when brand loyalty collides with star controversies and creative confusion. If the new Snow White plan indeed materializes, it's going to be watched closely by fans and analysts. Can Disney exorcise the meltdown ghosts, or will this overshadowing approach spark fresh cynicism? Will Zegler fight tooth and nail to defend her iteration, or vanish quietly from the conversation? The meltdown watchers say either path is possible, but neither will be quiet. We want to hear your thoughts. Do you think Disney is right to reboot Snow White so soon, effectively overshadowing the fiasco? Is Rachel Zegler's meltdown justified, or was she the architect of her own downfall? Sound off in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the meltdown, be sure to like the video, hit subscribe for more Hollywood unravelings, and check out the next video on your screen for an equally jaw-dropping industry saga you won't want to miss. Thanks for watching.